Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian President Putin gathers allies in Kazan to counter West's isolation of Moscow, as leaders from India, China, Brazil and South Africa arrive for the BRICS summit. Air raid sirens sounded in Tel Aviv as Hezbollah bombs the city's suburbs. Israel says about 20 rockets fired in the latest barrage by the Iran-backed group. The United Nations Development Agency says the war in Gaza has devastated the Palestinian economy and knocked down development levels in Gaza to what it was in the 1950s. Morocco rejects a United Nations proposal dividing Western Sahara to end territorial dispute with an Algeria-backed group, calls it unacceptable. According to initial toxicology reports, former One Direction singer Liam Payne had a cocktail of drugs, including crack cocaine, in his system at the time of his death in Argentina. Hello and welcome. Let's take a look at our top story, which is from Sudan, where the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, has claimed responsibility for shooting down a foreign cargo plane. Reports say the plane that has been shot down is an Ilyushin I-l-76, which is a Soviet-designed strategic aircraft. The aircraft shot down was reportedly flown by the New Way cargo of Kyrgyzstan. The RSF claims to have brought it down in Sudan's Malha region in northern Darfur, near the border with Chad. The RSF said the jet was allegedly supplying weapons to the Sudanese army. Sudan's army and the paramilitary have been embroiled in a brutal civil war since April of 2023. Reports say the RSF initially intercepted the jet to be an Egyptian Antonov, which is a strategic airlift cargo aircraft manufactured by Ukraine. RSF chief Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo had earlier made accusations that Egypt is involved in strikes on his troops in Sudan and that it is providing training, weapons and drones to the Sudanese army. Multiple videos of moments after the crash have emerged on social media. They show the debris of the plane as well as certain documents that survived the crash. But these remains, when examined, did not support the RSF claims. As per reports, the documents found in the debris, one of the crew members was carrying a badge that identified him as the main engineer for the Airline Transport Incorporation FZC, and it is a company based in the United Arab Emirates, which reportedly has ties to Kyrgyzstan. Another person on the plane was found to have a Russian passport. While images have surfaced of these documents, there has been no sign of life. Russia has reacted to the reports of the crash. Russian embassy in Khartoum has confirmed its diplomats are investigating the incident. The embassy has also indicated that Russians may have been on board at the time. So, was shooting a Russian jet or an Egyptian aircraft part of the RSF's plan? Now, it could be that the strike was a major intelligence failure on the part of the paramilitary forces. This is because evidence from the wreckage suggests that the plane was actually a part of an airlift sponsored by the UAE, which could have come to support the paramilitary RSF. In summary, US-backed the Group Conflict Observatory had earlier this month linked Niue cargo Ilyushin I-l-76 plane to arming the RSF. It reported that the airline had facilitated the UAE arms transfers through flights from the international airport in the Amjaraz city of Chad. Now, the Amjaraz is just across the border from Maha, where the shoot-down reportedly happened. Now, the UAE has, however, claimed its cargo plane has been supporting a local hospital. The UAE has been accused by the Sudanese army and the United Nations of backing the paramilitary RSF forces. United Nations experts have said accusations that the UAE armed the RSF were in fact credible. However, it has repeatedly denied these allegations. Now, the Gulf nation has not commented so far on the new evidence against it. However, what has unfolded in Sudan in the last 24 hours clearly shows how foreign interference has further complicated the civil war in the country. Reports suggest that weapons from multiple nations, including Iran, China, Turkey, are present in Sudan, which in turn is prolonging the 18-month-long conflict. As per the United Nations, over 20,000 people have been killed in the war so far, but some estimates put the toll up to 150,000. The conflict has also created the world's worst displacement crisis. Now, despite the huge humanitarian cost, fighting has intensified in recent weeks, with the army launching a major offensive to retake parts of the capital, Khartoum. Both sides have indicated that the prospects of a ceasefire are dim. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Musa, an international affairs expert who is joining us live from Dundee in the United Kingdom. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Musa, what evidence has the RSF provided to support their claim that the Russian plane was being used to assist the Sudanese army? And what is the significance of this incident for Russia's role or involvement in the Sudanese conflict?
Well, you know, this incident is really, really interesting and comes at a point where we see both sides, both the RSF as well as the Sudanese armed forces, really ratchet up the ante in terms of this particular conflict. And in terms of the RSF, the evidence that they have provided is that this particular plane has been used in times past in order to help in the shipment and the transportation of arms in support initially of the RSF, funny enough. But in this particular case, now of the Sudanese armed forces. And this comes at a time, remember, where Russia has recently switched sides, previously supporting the RSF, but has now switched sides to the Sudanese armed forces at a time whereby the Sudanese armed forces have been in closer ties with the Ukrainian military. And in order for Russia to cut off Ukraine's legs in terms of its connections in Africa, it has seen it fit in order to meet its own sort of objectives in the African continent through the Africa Group, formerly known as the Wagner Group. It has seen it fit to switch sides in support of the Sudanese armed forces in order to secure port rights at Port Sudan, which is currently under the control of the Sudanese armed forces. And so for the rapid support forces, it was critical to do this.
Right. And Musa, what role do the foreign powers, we've touched on Russia, but others, play in the ongoing Sudanese civil war? And how might this incident influence their involvement?
Well, look, this particular incident may perhaps motivate the Russians to continue in their sort of involvement in this particular conflict and their support for the Sudanese armed forces. But on the other hand, for the RSF, at a time where Russia is hosting, for example, the BRICS summit, there may be greater now motivation for the foreign players in this particular conflict, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Russia, all of which are members now of BRICS, to then find a political solution given the importance that Sudan has, but also the risk posed by this war in the greater region, where you think of countries like Chad, South Sudan, are facing their own sort of political instability, including Ethiopia, by the way, which is also a member of the BRICS.
Yes. And how does the downing of a Russian plane reflect the broader geopolitical interests in Sudan? And could it trigger shifts in foreign alliances?
Well, as evidenced by Russia's shifting alliances from the RSF to the Sudanese armed forces, is clear of the geopolitical considerations that each of these powers, as I have mentioned, are making currently as it pertains to this particular conflict. Now, the interesting thing is, what is the impact, perhaps, of how Russia in its own war against Ukraine is likely to also continue to position itself, particularly in Africa, particularly as it pertains to the gold exports, which I must remind you have been a very critical source for the Russian economy and the military. And second to that, you then consider that Russia has, for example, toed the line of Iran, who has been clear in the kind of support that it has given in terms of this particular conflict. So in many ways, what Sudan is here, Alyson, is a snapshot of the growing sort of alliances in geopolitics, where on the one side you have the Russians and the Iranians, and on the other side you have the USA, for example, which is also has an interest in this particular conflict, given the geopolitical and geoeconomic value that Sudan holds.
Absolutely. Musa, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us and for your valued analysis there.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's now move on to Cameroon, where the Central African country's absconding president has finally returned. Cameroon's 91-year-old president, Paul Biya, landed back in Central African country on Monday after a 42-day absence that had sparked rumors and raised questions about his health and whereabouts. Now, the chartered aircraft that was carrying President Biya and his wife, Chantal Biya, touched down from Geneva, Switzerland, in the capital city of Yaoundé, just a few minutes before 5 p.m. local time. Upon his arrival at the airport, President Biya was greeted by his Secretary General, Ferdinand Ngongo, with whom the nonagenarian head of state also chatted for a few minutes before getting into his official car. The president was also cheered by a crowd of supporters gathered at the airport, who were carrying posters as well as being dressed in fabrics cladding his image to welcome their beloved head of state. However, there was no interaction with the public. As the 91-year-old president's car began to exit the tarmac where his plane had landed, he and his wife were seen waving at the gathered crowd from the rear seat's window. Moreover, thousands of supporters from the ruling party, called the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, or the CPDM, thronged the streets to celebrate the return of the only president that they have known. The 22-kilometer stretch from the airport to the Aturi presidential palace was flanked by several billboards welcoming the nonagenarian president back, and also saw his supporters cheerfully dancing while waiting for the convoy to pass. Now, social media users also did not miss a chance to comment on the president's arrival, while some users took to the platform X to welcome him back to Cameroon. Others were quick to say that the country genuinely needed a new leader. One user also mocked the long motorcade that was escorting the president to his palace. Now, who is the 91-year-old president of Cameroon, Paul Biya? And why was he missing in action for nearly 6 weeks? Let's understand. Now, Paul Biya has been the president of Cameroon since 1982. He is the only leader that most Cameroonians know and is the second president of the cocoa and oil-producing country. The nonagenarian president is also the second longest-serving leader in Africa, after Equatorial Guinea's head of state. President Biya has previously taken extended stays abroad, especially in Switzerland, and is accused by human rights groups of intimidating opponents to strengthen his grip on political power. Now, earlier this month, speculations grew about the nonagenarian president's health after he missed the United Nations General Assembly session late in September, and then did not turn up at the Francophonie summit in Paris in early October. Rumors about the president being gravely ill or even dead had been doing the rounds on social media, while media reports began questioning the president's whereabouts after he was last seen in public during a China-Africa forum in early September. However, the government had quashed the rumors, saying that they were pure fantasy and that the president was in good health. They had also banned media outlets from discussing about the president's health, as it was a matter of national security, which further increased speculations. Yet while the 91-year-old head of state's dramatic return from Geneva showed that he was ready to take charge of the Central African country once again, it only further raised questions on whether he is absolutely well enough to run Cameroon and whether he would seek another term in the 2025 presidential election. Shifting focus now to Mozambique in southern Africa, which is reeling from post-election violence. The streets of Mozambique have been witnessing clashes between demonstrators and the police in the aftermath of the 9th of October presidential election. The early results show the ruling party Frelimo, which has been in power for 50 years, is set for another win. However, opposition candidates say that the poll was rigged. Several hundred people, including journalists, rallied in the capital of Maputo on Monday to protest against the alleged electoral fraud. These protesters were met with a heavy crackdown, with police firing tear gas and also reportedly live ammunition to disperse the crowds. Protesters, meanwhile, were seen pelting stones and setting fire to tires in the streets of Maputo. Shops in the capital were closed and the streets in downtown remained quiet.
Our rights to protest as Mozambican citizens gave me the will to go to the streets. What is happening in the country are things which I do not understand. There are killings, kidnappings, and we end up not understanding who is behind it, and automatically Mozambique is not safe anymore.
We didn't come here to break things. They threw tear gas at us. What's that about? Let the world see what's happening and going on. This is a dictatorship in our country. This is a dictatorship. For how long are we going to live like this? For how long?
Many had gathered to protest at the site in the capital where 2 opposition party figures were shot dead on Saturday. Gunmen killed the lawyer of Inácio Mondlane, and he was a leading opposition politician belonging to the Podemos party and also another party official. Mondlane, who ran for president in the 9th of October election, was also reportedly a target of the police crackdown. Police on Monday raided his campaign headquarters, forcing him to flee. Now, tensions are rising as the final results of the general elections are set to be announced on the 24th of October. Daniel Chapo is expected to be announced as the winner to succeed President Filipe Nyusi, who has served the maximum of 2 terms allowed under the Constitution. Both of them belong to the Mozambique's Frelimo party. Now, the party, which led a rebellion against Portuguese rule, has been ruling Mozambique since 1975. After fighting a civil war from 1976 to 1992 against the anti-communist resistance, it won Mozambique's first democratic elections in 1994. But the party has been accused of electoral fraud to maintain its grip on power, the allegations which it denies. Now, last year, several people were killed in clashes after municipal elections were won by Frelimo. The recent violence in Mozambique has been condemned by international bodies, the European Union, the African Union, and the United Nations, while rejecting the violence and killings, called on the authorities to identify the perpetrators. The United States, which is the largest bilateral donor to Mozambique, has also reacted and has called for a swift and thorough investigation into the killings of the opposition leaders. However, there has been no response by the ruling party or the electoral body of Mozambique on the allegations of voter fraud and irregularities by foreign parties. Our last story is from Libya, where issues with waste management in North African country's Khartoum city have left heaps of garbage on the seashore, creating health and environmental risks for locals. Waste management is one of the biggest challenges that Libya faces. Lack of adequate resources and infrastructure have meant that there are no appropriate ways of managing and treating the waste. With politicians and decision-makers busy dealing with the internal conflict in the country, handling waste management has taken a backseat. Our next report gets you all the details.
This is Libya's Khartoum city, lying on the beautiful Mediterranean coast. Decades ago, this city had everything to make it a perfect tourist spot, like golden sand and pristine waters. But today, piles of garbage have dotted its seashore. From a complicated political crisis in their country to a complicated pollution crisis in their city, the residents of Khartoum city are on a constant lookout for peace and prosperity. The port city, located in the northwestern part of Libya, dates its origins back to about 1000 BCE. It's home to the UNESCO World Heritage Archaeological Site Leptis Magna, a prominent city of the Carthaginian Empire and Roman Libya. A major government-managed landfill had operated in Khartoum for nearly 50 years. However, after several community protests, the landfill named Karkar was closed. The reason? The city residents claimed that the landfill was an environmental risk. The landfill was releasing toxic pollutants into the air, leading to the spread of diseases. Listening to the people's demands, the administration decided to close the landfill earlier this year. But did this resolve the situation for locals living near the landfill? Well, no, it did not. Residents living close to the landfill continue to complain that it poses an environmental risk. And why is that so? They argue that the remnants of hard and organic waste have yet to be processed properly.
The environmental impacts of the landfill are still present until now, as we did not get rid of the waste decomposing in it, and it is causing damage. It emits gases which release poisons and cause pollution which move with the air and the oxygen exhaled by people. So the damage caused by the landfill are present until now.
With the landfill now closed and no other alternative left for the residents, people have also begun dumping garbage around the city's seashores, leading to devastating scenes around the area.
It is a big shock today that we are here at the Place of Waste Collection Center, which is on the seashore of Khartoum City. You can have a look at the scene in front of you. It is beyond expression. No one can imagine the amount of garbage here.
يعني شنو تعبير ما عادش واحد بيقدر بيعبر عن كمية القمام اللي موجودة هذه.
For Idris Al-Rafai, who is a cleaning services manager, lack of resources, including lack of heavy machinery to transport garbage, in addition to the population increase and less wages for employees, has made it difficult for cleaning service providers to do their jobs properly.
Unfortunately, there is no cooperation from higher authorities to provide the needed resources to transport this waste and to provide another landfill or a factory to process. The cleaning worker is ready for service, drivers are ready for service, but vehicles are dilapidated. A cleaning worker's salary is 700 dinars. This is a problem we are suffering from. Oh, our people, we are ready to work at day and at night, at any time. But we are completely unable to carry out our duties in the needed way.
Waste management is one of the biggest challenges for Libya. Each year, the nation generates about 350,000 metric tons or 386,000 tons of plastic waste. Collection, disposal and treatment of waste in Libyan cities is not being appropriately managed. In addition, lack of adequate infrastructure has further worsened the waste management situation. And to top it all off, landfills are also nearing their full capacity and pose risks to the environment. For environmental activists, large piles of garbage around the seashore is a concerning matter. They believe if the shores are not cleaned on time, the waste would eventually move inside the city to a great length due to huge waves during the winter months. Still, despite raising voices and launching campaigns to clean the shores, activists are yet to see the results of their efforts. Heaps of waste continue to persist on seashores. Even for the politicians and decision-makers, dealing currently with the conflict within the country is more important than handling the waste management crisis. But how long will it take for Libya to resolve this prolonged problem? Only time will tell.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and goodbye. Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual on Firstpost, where we get you the top